everyone, welcome to the Spectre Spoilercast. Check out that alliteration. I'm Captain Logan, and joining me this evening to thoroughly discuss the fourth in the Daniel Craig Bond movies, it's Dan Torrey.
For England audience.
And with that blatant New Hampshire accent. And and beware the
story. I can pull it off. I'm a British loyalist. Come on.
And beware the Steve Baxi.
I got nothing witty.
You got nothing witty.
Yep, that's my review, by the way.
Oh, okay. So we all have seen Spectre. Now, have either of you guys had a chance to see it twice?
I saw it a second time earlier today.
Oh, you did? Okay. Well, then you will be way more prepared than I am. First of all, I should mention that Eric was going to try to be here with us, and he wasn't able to make it, unfortunately. But Steve will probably mention a couple of his opinions because Steve and Eric not only did a 3-hour show on the road to Spectre the other day, but then they spent 2 hours on the phone after seeing Spectre that they did not record. That I'm still upset with them about.
Yeah, I got back to my room. The moment I turned on my laptop, I got a call from Eric, and we talked 2 hours about that movie.
That reminds me of the conversation I had with him after Dark Knight Rises.
That's exactly what it was.
It'll be interesting to
saying it's exactly like when he saw Dark Knight Rises.
Did he really? Did he then after that say, and that's why I expect that every time we talk, we'll spend the first hour of every conversation talking about this movie, because that's what happened with me and him with Rises for. I think it's still happening, really.
I'll let you know if that happens next time he calls me.
So we're going to jump right into it. I am probably going to have far less to say than these guys because I'm pretty much going to moderate this and throw in a couple things here and there because these guys are big Bond fans. Spy is not really my genre, so these are movies that I have a casual interest in and a passing familiarity, but I have not seen all the Bond movies, anything like all of them. I've only just now started going back and watching them from the beginning, which has been a fun, interesting experience. I loved Skyfall. It's probably one of my favorite movies now of all time, and this was a fascinating follow-up. So, I want to start with Dan because I haven't heard anything from Dan really yet, except for a short conversation we had earlier before we were recording. So Dan, how did you feel about this, and did you feel like it was the weird, surprisingly convoluted mess that a lot of people are making it out to be?
Well, I kind of appreciated that this movie was attempting to be a celebration of all things James Bond, even more so than Skyfall. This movie had a lot of references to the past 23 Bond movies, starting from the opening scene with him dressed up in the skeleton garb that resembled one of the villains from the previous movies.
Live and Let Die.
Yeah, so that was pretty cool. Like, there was a bunch of little references like that. So if you're a Bond fan, there's a lot of things to catch, and that stuff was kind of cool. Thematically, I think the movie was dealing with a lot of the same things that Skyfall dealt with, but didn't do them as well. It was kind of like Skyfall again, just not done as well. And they tried to tie up all the Daniel Craig movies together, which is interesting because Skyfall is the one movie that was, besides Casino Royale, obviously, because that's where it started. But this movie and Quantum of Solace are the majority of the Daniel Craig movies, in that they're trying to be direct sequels, and the direct sequels so far haven't been all that successful. And I think this is one of them. I was really excited to see this because I really like Skyfall, and I thought Sam Mendes did such a good job with the last one. Direction-wise, I don't really have too much of a problem with this. I thought it was beautifully shot, just like Skyfall was. The script is just kind of a mess, and we'll get into some of the reasons why we think so. But yeah, I was really disappointed with how lackluster the villain plot is, because I was into the movie for maybe about the first 30 minutes when they were uncovering when Bond was going to uncover the mystery. That stuff seemed cool initially when the mystery hadn't been paid off yet, and the villain hadn't been revealed, and all that kind of thing. Like, the anticipation to it was much better than what we ended up getting. So I don't know. I was overall kind of disappointed with it, but it was a fun movie to watch. I didn't regret seeing it in the theaters. It wasn't like the worst movie I'd ever seen or anything.
Go ahead, Steve. What's kind of your overall your overview, first thoughts spurn us ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, this movie had a lot of references, and part of what would bug me about them and the movie in general is every time it made a reference and it opened up the door for the movie to be better, and it never got there. This is heavily on Our Majesty's Secret Service, and it's not even close to that good. When I went to see it, I saw it with a friend, and the best part of that night was hanging out with that friend, and the movie was just a conceit for that. And it bothered me that it disappeared out of my mind so quickly after I saw it. A Bond movie shouldn't do that. Eric and I mentioned this when we were talking, but Bond movies are scaled by how long they feel. If you find them boring, it's most likely a bad movie like Diamonds Are Forever. If you're having fun, regardless of how kooky it can be, it's ultimately a good movie like, say, Spy Who Loved Me. This one is in that weird middle ground where it's enjoyable, but I really felt the length. And part of it is because I kept waiting for a gut punch. I kept waiting for the movie to do something. Everything was just introduce. Nothing felt like it ever actually hit you the way it thought it was hitting you. And I don't mind saying this is the worst Craig movie. I would go as far as say this is one of the worst James Bond movies. There's a lot wrong with it.
Some of those get pretty bad, though.
I know, but I mean, like, I tried ranking them earlier today. I think this is one of the worst, and part of it is because it's probably one of the most immature, and particularly in the politics, it has some of the most immature politics I have ever seen on film.
I had a really weird experience with this movie because I loved it for the first half. Like, I think even farther than Dan was saying, the first half an hour. Like Steve told me before I went and saw it that he didn't like it very much, and I asked him. I said, "Okay, but you're a big Bond fan. Like, is it possible that I will enjoy it more than you, not being a big Bond guy?" And he said, "No, I don't really think so." And I went to see it, and of course, that kind of thing is always going to inform your experience a little bit. It's impossible not to have preconceived notions after that, either more positive or more negative. Steve, I got an hour 15 in, and I went, I don't know what Steve's talking about. I'm enjoying the crap out of this. And then, as soon as Blofeld shows up and starts talking, the movie no longer had anything remotely close to anything resembling an internal logic. It just all went away. I didn't know what I was watching anymore. And yet, through the entire movie, beginning, middle, and end, it was incredibly competently made. It was... It's a gorgeous movie. The editing is fantastic all the way through. The cinematography is fantastic all the way through.
I'll break that a little bit as we get further down.
Okay, well, that's fine. I'm just saying that was my experience with it. And as I was watching it and got into that third act, when it's suddenly revealed that Blofeld is responsible for things that we know other people were responsible for, with no explanation as to why those things would have been connected at all once. It was the most generic explanation for a thing, and trying to tie everything up retroactively. I don't know how anybody watches that, and it's like, oh wow, it's all connected. Look at the dots. Like, it's like jigsaw puzzle. No, it's like no. I know why Silva was doing what he was doing last movie. And he had a really personal, revenge motive, and I don't know why he would have done any of that for Spectre. I didn't know what was going on. But so once I got to that stuff, and the love interest, which we'll get to, which was awful. I found myself, just everything about that. I found myself going, I'm still really enjoying this, but it's terrible. Like, I very rarely had that experience where, like, and that's why when I did my How I Felt About it, I flipped my sign red and said, but I'd still go see it. Like, I kind of want to watch it again. I enjoyed so much about it, but it's really bad. It's this really competently made movie that's ultimately a really bad story. That's what it is. It's fun to watch, but it's a terrible story.
I can't agree with you more there. Especially like the first opening sequence in Mexico City. That's just a tour de force in direction. One continuous shot as we follow Bond throughout the city. He's like, ducking out of windows and things like that. It's just really well made. The people that did the camera work with the movie, if anything.
Going across those roofs. I don't know what it was. I don't know what it is about the way Daniel Craig moves. Nobody can
He's just the coolest man alive, right?
Nobody hops over that much space between roofs like Daniel Craig does.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I wanted to mention too. Like Daniel Craig's my favorite James Bond out of all of the actors who have played him so far in this series. And I don't know, it's just kind of disappointing to me that he didn't get a proper send-off, because this movie acts like this is the last time that we're going to see this version of James Bond. He's got the girl, he's got the old car driving off into the sunset at the end of the movie, as opposed to Skyfall, which ended on a really somber note. I don't know, even if Craig comes back, I don't know what kind of story you tell after this, which is kind of unfortunate, right?
And he's really apprehensive about coming back, and we talk about some of the production stuff as we go along. But he's been in lots of interviews, sometimes saying that he loves it and he wants to do more, and other times saying that doing more would be worse than slitting his own wrist. And we don't really know where we stand on it. But part of the weird experience and part of why people like Sam Mendes say they don't want to do this again is because the script was a nightmare. They didn't have a finished product while they were filming, to the point where even Daniel Craig had to chip in and write parts of the story as it was going on.
That's insane. And that's why when you look at it with some perspective and you know those things, Steve, it's hard not to be impressed that it's as coherent as it is.
Yeah, it speaks to the talent of the people working on the film, I suppose, right?
That's what I can't get my mind around, is that, like, it never completely falls apart. It's just not good. It doesn't totally, it never completely makes any sense, but I've only got to see it once, so, like, I haven't fully processed, like, what Bond's character arc is exactly, and if he's making light switch choices or not. The love interest is making light switch choices, though. That's happening. But anyway.
Yeah, Craig has a real regression. Because the way Casino Royale ends, Bond goes from being a blunt instrument to realizing that there has to be a little bit of an aiming process, that he can't just be a straight weapon. But that the mind that he needs and the thing he has to develop that go along with that trigger come in Quantum of Solace. And Quantum of Solace is a really flawed movie, but overall he kind of becomes James Bond between those two movies. Then Skyfall shows up, and I love Skyfall. Skyfall is a great, great film, but they regress that a little bit to get back to the blunt instrument Bond that needs to get back in touch with who he is to begin with. And then this regresses that even further, because he is James Bond in the opening of the movie, and he goes rogue for the third or fourth time in a row.
Yep.
And the lesson he learned at the end, the whole love interest thing, and to be fair, and Eric mentioned this, to be fair, even in Majesty's Secret Service, despite how great that movie is, you don't buy that James Bond falls in love with this woman. That's always a thing. That's whatever. But the fact that he sees a tape with Vespa interrogation written on it and he does nothing about it, the fact that they call back to her name constantly, you see pictures of her all the time, you see Craig constantly going to places that should remind him of who he used to be, and he doesn't confront them as a different person. He still acts like the weird blunt instrument that we know he isn't anymore. And that's the big thing with this movie, is that it was supposed to be kind of like Iron Man 3, where you remake the first movie with a new character, with a grown character, and have him face the same things again and see what the new choices he makes and whether or not those revelations and those growths have stuck with him or not. And they did half of that. They made the same movie over again. They just didn't realize that the character changed.
See, I made the argument that some of that would kind of work okay if, A, you didn't have the first two movies and Skyfall was the first of them in being a celebration of Bond movies and kind of, introducing us to this new Bond that becomes Bond through it, and B, if then because then we wouldn't be able to also make this a movie that ties four movies together, which frankly it shouldn't be doing because it's not even trying.
No, the whole factor behind everything is awful.
It's this. I can't even believe that they're playing that like I'm supposed to take it seriously. And I mean, Craig tears it up, like it is in a scene. It's as convincing as it can possibly be, but it's ridiculous.
Yeah, the cast of this movie is really great. Craig tears it up as always, but I really like Dave Bautista as the henchman in this. I think he's kind of consummate James Bond villain henchman guy. He's really great. He doesn't really have all that much dialogue, but he kind of plays the big, imposing brute really well. And I think Christoph Waltz is a really good pick for, spoilers, Blofeld. That's who ends up being by the end of the movie. And when he's in scene giving a performance, he's really good, but if you think about the things he's saying, they don't really make all that much sense, which is the problem, right?
I'll argue that I don't like Christoph Waltz as Blofeld.
Fair enough. I thought he was great. I liked him a lot.
I mean, he's perfect for the role. My problem is they don't really give Christoph Waltz a Christoph Waltz kind of role. And again, this goes back to the conversation Eric and I had. But if you look at Christoph Waltz's history of acting, there's always this history of he's a very in-control guy that in very particular moments absolutely loses control. And the performance Christoph Waltz gives as Blofeld throughout is just this weird, generic, I'm behind and controlling everything, despite the fact that he contradicts himself line to line. He's in 3 scenes in the entire movie. The entire movie's got 3 scenes. And he says one sentence, and the very next sentence contradicts it, and he's giving it with the straightest face possible. And I can't buy that performance. Because he's got to be turning his head and wondering, what am I even saying? He never at any point feels like the connection between him and Bond makes any sense. Because it's a double motivation. At one point it's, well, you're bugging me. At another point it's, Daddy liked you more. And neither one of those things come out in his performance. He's just saying things.
Well, and I thought all that would have worked better if they'd grown up together.
Or we even realized that he had a brother to begin with, because it's so retroactive.
Well, I mean, you could say that if you line to line, you know, if we don't know any background and we don't realize that, well, it's just a hobbled together script that knows it doesn't know what it's doing. You could read it as, well, he's just really psychotic. So, like, he's kind of a different person line to line. But the problem with that is then you wouldn't buy him being able to stay in the background this long because he's got to be with it and lucid enough to be able to run all this for so long and stay in the background. Like Brandon said in our how I felt about it, and I agree with this, that he didn't buy that guy could possibly stay in the background without anybody knowing about him.
Yeah, no, it's not possible. And they try to play that up early, like his first scene where Craig first sees him, and it's all this shadowed-out organization thing. And that's a really cool scene. It's really tense. I really like what Waltz does with it, and he's really, it's really quiet. You have no idea. He's really unassuming. But then he just changes. Like the next scene, he's this weird, bombastic, you only live twice kind of elaborate generic villain again. And it doesn't hold. It's not even a performance being carried over. It's just weird changes scene to scene.
And it felt too informed by the last villain in Skyfall.
Yeah.
You know, like something about that performance, and I don't know if I don't know if it was the writing, I don't know if it was the directing or how he was playing it, but like it just watched too much like almost a generic version of
Silva.
What is it? Silva, who was fascinating, and I understood and made a lot of sense. The problem is that this guy, it's so hard to top yourself from just that movie overall, but also that villain, that you get to this. This guy needs to be like the scariest person in the universe because he's been allegedly behind the scenes running all this stuff in the first place. So I need to not be thinking about Silva when I'm watching that guy, is the point I'm making.
Yeah,
and I was. So the whole time I was like, it's sort of like if you tried to out-Joker the Joker, and of course I make that allusion because Dark Knight influenced Skyfall so much.
Yeah. And it didn't help that they kept hammering in this connection to Skyfall that just didn't make any sense. Now, if you gave me a line that said the Skyfall started because Blofeld gave Silva the device that had all those secret agent names on it, and that got the ball rolling. And so it's still about Silva's motivation to screw over M and Bond, but he only got the ball rolling because of a resource that Silva had. That's perfect.
It could be explained. Wouldn't it be really interesting if he had no idea what the source was? Like, it would be really cool if Silva was doing all that stuff and he didn't realize that Spectre was helping him. And also, you could have used that to retroactively explain how Silva was able to do so much of the stuff that people didn't buy he was able to he had that same Joker problem of I don't know how he possibly thinks this far ahead.
Exactly. And if you just said that Spectre was his resource machine, that's fine. The problem is they made it feel like Silva was an agent of Spectre, and that doesn't make any sense.
I don't understand any of that. We haven't heard from Dan in a while. Jump in, pal.
Yeah, I mean, I think I really like Christoph Waltz with what he was given. I agree that the dialogue that he was given to deliver contradicted scene to scene, and you couldn't really get a grasp on what his character was supposed to be. But I liked the way that he played the performance. I don't know. I enjoyed him, I guess, a little bit more than you guys did. With the little we were given, I thought the scene where he was introduced was really great. Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of things I really liked about the movie. It just didn't come together for me. In pieces, there was things that I liked quite a bit, but.
I like the flavor of it a lot. I mean, I think the tone and atmosphere in making this thing a modern cheesy Bond movie, which I could never decide if that's what they were exactly going for. It felt a little bit muddled, where like sometimes I felt like it was supposed to be more of a modern Bond movie, and other times I thought it was supposed to be more of a classic but modern Bond movie. But I liked the flavor of it almost more than Skyfall, and then the story didn't work.
It's weird because it unintentionally fulfills a weird Bond pattern, and this goes into a bigger point about how Eon Productions needs to lose the rights to James Bond. That has to happen. But if you go back to Sean Connery, you get 2 movies that deal with an overarching plot. Then you get a third movie, Goldfinger, that has nothing to do with anything we've seen before, but defines who that version of the character is. Then you get a 4th movie in Thunderball, which is not very good at all. Then you go to Roger Moore. Same thing. You get 2 movies that are all kind of generic. They build on each other a little bit. You get a 3rd movie that defines who he is with Spy Who Loved Me. Then you get a 4th movie, Moonraker, that destroys all that. Daniel Craig's got the exact same thing, where he tops himself in the 3rd movie, and the 4th one is everything wrong with Moonraker and Thunderball, as 4th movies as well.
And then Pierce Brosnan just kind of gets progressively worse.
Yes, Pierce Brosnan's weird. Pierce Brosnan's a weird case.
It's not even progressively worse. There's just like Goldfinger and then a cliff and then the rest of the movie.
Yeah, you mean Goldeneye? Yeah.
Yeah, Goldeneye. That's what I meant.
Yeah, I mean, because no one's gonna say the world is not enough to find Pierce Brosnan's era. No one cares about the world is not enough.
No, Goldeneye did.
Yeah,
people love that.
This goes into the bigger argument, but I'll argue that Spy Who Loved Me, GoldenEye, Goldfinger, Skyfall, they're all flukes. There's no way that these people know what they're doing anymore, or ever did, really.
I think we should talk a little bit about how the script writing process happened, because Steve, what you were telling us earlier about this is fascinating to me. So apparently John Logan wrote a script and they hated it, and they told him he could do whatever he wanted to, and he wrote a script, and they were like, oh, you know what, never mind, you're done, and they fired him. And what's fascinating about that is, Steve, and go into this, you were telling us about what he was originally trying to do, which sounded really fascinating. I generally don't like John Logan as a screenwriter at all, and when I first saw his name on this, I was like, oh, okay, that's why.
And importantly, he wrote Skyfall, too, so...
Yeah. I forgot all about that, yeah, and so, I mean, like, I gotta give him credit. I guess he writes some good movies. You just don't give him Star Trek.
Yeah, so essentially what happened is after Skyfall did amazing numbers and everyone loved it and people were calling it the best James Bond movie ever, because they're really close to that title, they gave John Logan carte blanche to do whatever he wanted. And the idea was that we remake Casino Royale. Not literally, but we put Bond in the exact same situation where it's about gambling, it's about a woman that's able to read him completely, it's about a villain that's the mirror opposite of who he is in confidence and mentality and morality and all that. Just remake Casino Royale and give us a James Bond who's grown up from that and see what choices he makes. And the main villain, being Blofeld, would be put through the exact same ringer that Bond was in Casino Royale, but he turns away and makes a different choice. And so it's the origin of Blofeld in direct contrast to the origin for James Bond that we saw, which is a really, really great idea.
Yeah.
The studio absolutely hated it. So they fired John Logan. They brought back Purvis and Wade, who have been consummate Bond writers for a while now. And the basic idea with those guys is just that someone writes a script that's a genuinely good story or a framework of a story, and they just throw in action scenes and Bondiness to it. Purvis and Wade came in, and they rewrote that. That didn't work out, so they also hired Jez Butterworth, who hasn't done too much. I don't even recognize his name from any big thing aside from Edge of Tomorrow. And
which is a great movie.
yeah, which is a fun movie. And then they also brought in Daniel Craig, because the script was not done by the time the movie started filming. The script only got finished halfway through the film being in production.
Oh my god!
And
that's crazy.
It got worse because the movie went so over budget, and this was a bit of a controversy. The movie went so over budget that they started cutting breaks and changing the story to help cut down the cost of it. And so a lot of the smaller sets and the reused MI6 headquarters, the fact that the opening scene in New Mexico has so many panning shots of the city, all come from them trying to save money and trying to get tax breaks in different locations and such. Barbara Broccoli didn't want to tone down the places they went, but they really toned down the design of the sets and stuff. So you get a whole bunch of big bombastic action scenes followed by a whole bunch of nothing in between.
That's fascinating, because I didn't even pick up on that while I was watching it. I mean, I felt like the production values were top-notch all the way through.
Well, I mean, going back and rewatching it, and my friend told me this as we were watching the movie, when Bond's being attacked by Dave Bautista, whose name is Mr. Hank, but they don't say it in the movie for some reason, when they're fighting in the train, my friend leaned over and said, "Why is this train so brittle?" And rewatching it, you really see that the train set is not very well designed. Right after that, the set is nothing but a blank desert. Like, everything just goes completely smaller scale until you get to Blofeld's headquarters for a little while.
That's fascinating. You also said something about in the original script, M was supposed to be evil, and the actor didn't want to do it.
Yeah. Rolf Phineas always plays villains, and he didn't want to. So the original idea was Blofeld's an African warlord, and M turns into a traitor. And the idea was that M was going to be the inside man, the way C is in this film right now. But Rolf Phineas didn't want to do it at all. He absolutely refused, so they changed the whole thing. The other idea then was to make Tanner, the MI6 agent that we've seen in the films throughout, ever since Quantum of Solace, the guy that follows M around, the guy that was giving Bond his briefing during his physical fitness exam in Skyfall.
Oh, okay, that guy, yeah.
The random guy. And that's kind of a good idea, because we've seen him so much that you kind of buy his turn being dramatic. But they didn't do anything with that either. And they throw in Andrew Scott, who plays C, and Moriarty on Sherlock. And his characterization is absolutely generic. It doesn't mean anything, because that's kind of what the script amounted to by that point.
I can kind of see Ralph Fiennes' reservations about being an evil M in this movie, especially since in the last movie, for most of it, they were kind of playing him as kind of a morally ambiguous character. You didn't know if Bond should trust this guy, and he finally proved by the end of the movie that he was a trustworthy person, and it would have completely undermined all of that stuff by making him evil in the movie right after that. I can see why he wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. And I really like him as M. I think he's great in the role. He's not given anything good character-wise, but acting-wise, he's great.
Yeah. I mean, I thought he had moments in this, and there were a couple of ideas that could have been, fleshed out and dealt with more that would have been interesting. It's really funny knowing that he was supposed to be evil in the first place, looking at what he has to do in this, where he is forced to shut down MI6 but doesn't want to, and is really pushing against this idea of replace everything with technology and basically do exactly what we did in Winter Soldier, which is surveillance on everybody, and almost going as far as to the point a gun at everybody thing. I felt like this was like Winter Soldier light in a lot of ways. I mean, like you basically got Spectre infiltrating MI6, so it's not the same thing as like Hydra's all over it, but it's really similar to that.
Yeah, my big issue with all of that, my big issue with the whole surveillance idea is I don't understand, one, how it's necessarily a bad thing, and two, what Spectre gets out of it. Because the idea is that 9 countries, the Nine Eyes program, will pool their resources together and have all their surveillance team together, which, A, no country in the world would actually do. That's a really immature way to look at the world. No country is going to voluntarily turn over all their surveillance. But the other thing is Spectre is already spying on everyone. They already know what everyone's doing minute to minute. So what possible advantage does this have that they don't already have? And if it's because they don't have reach in other countries, that doesn't make any sense, because if everyone we saw in previous films was working for Spectre, they clearly have reach in every other country. So I have no idea why they want the surveillance program. The other thing is, it's not arguing why surveillance is bad. It's saying that Andrew Scott's character is evil because he has a surveillance program, and we shouldn't like surveillance programs because Bond is fighting against the organization that's instituting it. That's not an argument. That's a straw man.
Well, especially because, I mean, what you're talking about are people whose jobs are to go around and spy on people. Yeah. So, like, they already think that this is a necessary evil if it's an evil.
Yeah, exactly.
So then the question is, so we could, Steve, talk about this in a, as you said, mature adult way, and say, well, we're crossing a line that we don't want to cross, which is what Winter Soldier did with it.
Yeah.
Where it's like that, SHIELD is still an agency that spies on people, and Captain America understands that, but we've gone too far with it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, the way it plays in this is basically that what's worse is just that they're going to shut down the 00 program, and then we can't have any more Bond movies. Like, that's the big evil.
No, you're right. I didn't really understand Spectre's plan and how it had all connected to the personal vendetta that Blofeld supposedly had against James Bond. Those things seem kind of different to me. Like, they seem to just be coincidentally happening at the same time. And Bond has to fight against them because Blofeld's connected to both plans. But yeah, I mean, maybe the idea was that surveillance is inherently, like, on its, like, mass surveillance of the entire population is inherently bad. But I agree with you. They should have provided an argument as to why that's bad and shown us the consequences of, like, for Bond, why would that be a bad thing? Even if it's not, even if you don't want to explore how it's bad for the entire population, if you want the protagonist to have a useful role in that story, make it some sort of negative consequence for him, right? Like, mass surveillance of the program would eliminate the 00 thing, but he could just go rogue and do whatever he wants, like he does all the time anyway.
Well, yeah, and it seems like there could be a natural character arc for M there, where he has at the beginning of the movie put, and I like this idea, the nanites in Bond's blood. I like that. By the way, Q is fun, even if the movie's bad. Yeah. Like he's so good all the way through it, and I like that scene where Q puts the nanites in his blood and doesn't even tell him what it is until right after he does it. He's like, oh, by the way, we can track you anywhere now. And like it's M who orders that, so you could have this kind of natural character arc of like I'm for like taking away the kind of God-given freedoms of people that work in this organization because they've given up they've kind of given that up in order to selflessly work for the government. In exchange for a license to kill, and then have this arc with the bad guy who wants to have surveillance for everybody, where he's like, oh, maybe I should rethink that. There could be something to that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess.
And the blood doesn't go anywhere. Bond gets injected with smart blood, and he says, "Hey Q, turn it off," and he does, and it's not a problem ever for the whole movie.
Don't they turn it back on?
M needs to know where Bond is, and it puts Q's job in jeopardy, but it doesn't matter, because M trusts Bond word on absolutely nothing. M is on Bond's side throughout the whole movie, and by the end, when they're working together, M has no idea what's going on. He just blindly trusts Bond to kill the right people.
That's a really good point. Now, I will fight you a little bit on what you said earlier about Bond, once again, just going rogue like he does in every movie, because this is a case where he kind of goes rogue, but it's more a duty to the person that used to run MI6, which for him trumps anything else.
Which is another problem, because how did Judi Dench know this person? And did Spectre know so far in advance that Judi Dench needed this guy dead so Bond could track him through Spectre? Because that seems to be the plan. And the other thing is that if M ordered him on a mission while she was alive and he has evidence of it, why isn't he just going to MI6?
That's a really good point.
He really can trust M. In the previous film, there was that moment where Q and M decide to work with Bond to go off the grid. This guy has proven himself to Bond already. There's no reason he should be going behind his back.
I thought the same thing. Thanks for bringing that up, because I forgot about this. While I was watching it, I was like, I don't know why this is a secret.
Yeah.
I mean, like his going and doing what she told him to. Yeah, okay. I mean, I buy that. But what? Yeah.
Just from the conceit, the movie doesn't work. And I mean, I thought that in the theaters, where I'm like, Bond's got a message from M. I don't know why he's not going to MI6 right away.
Yeah, there's no reason that the smart bullet thing would have even had to happen in the first place.
Yeah.
And then I'm starting to buy into your point, and then they do it, and it doesn't matter much. Yeah.
No, it's frustrating because there's so many better ways to do this. There's so many great ideas inherently buried in this that it's just not bothering to explore.
I mean, you've got scenes that in a vacuum are just really cool, like that the scene with the Spectre meeting. I thought everything about that was just really cool looking. I mean, like, it's really over the top cheesy Bond stuff, but it was just I liked that scene a lot. It was fun to watch it.
Oh yeah, that looked great. The scene where Mr. White kills himself is fantastic.
Yeah,
I love that scene.
And was worth having to sit through a second time.
Yeah.
Well, you want to talk about weird bipolar chick? Because that's what I'm gonna call her. She she. Here's what sucks about it. I liked her at first, and then she got kind of whiny, but I was still kind of with it for a while because she was, like you said earlier, kind of the girl that sees through Bond and doesn't want to, she's better than being the Bond chick, and then all of a sudden on a dime now she's the Bond chick.
Yeah, I agree. I liked her at first too because she was kind of the girl that was immersed in the world that Bond exists within, the secret world that most people don't see.
Yeah.
And she saw through him like that, and you can buy maybe they have some natural connection because she understands what he has to do more than anyone else he's ever encountered before. But I don't know, that changes really fast, and they don't really earn it. Like there's no rapport built between the two of them at all. It's very strange. Other than the fact that they're involved in action scenes together, I guess.
Yeah.
They act like some big, huge shift has happened in their relationship that I was not privy to. Like, I went to the bathroom for 30 seconds, but I'm pretty sure it didn't happen there.
I didn't go to the bathroom at all, and I can confirm.
And it didn't happen, okay. All right. Yeah, that was really strange. And I mean, like, she's vehemently against the notion of being in any kind of relationship with him, physical or otherwise. And frankly, I feel like he's mostly just annoyed with her for about half of it, right?
Mm.
And then, like she's just, he needs her, and then all of a sudden, like, it's not just a shift for her, it's a shift for both of them. Like, all of a sudden, he's like, when he says, "I love you," I lost it.
Oh, yeah, it was awful. Why wasn't she Tracy? Why wasn't she Tracy Draco from On Her Majesty's? It's exactly the same character. It's exactly the same ending. There's no reason why you couldn't just use that character, because at least then I'd buy it a little bit more. Because like I said before, On Her Majesty's, you don't buy that Tracy and Bond fall in love. It's just kind of a thing and you accept it because it works for the story. But if you're going to get Bond to fall in love with anyone that isn't Vespa, why not make it Tracy Bond?
Well, at the very least, could we not have it be this, like, really blatant, we hate each other, now we love each other thing? Like,
no, it was awful. And it's not a bad idea if Bond is able to work with a person that can understand him more, because she's the daughter of an assassin. She's the daughter of a criminal. Clearly, she's got an eye on the world her whole life in a way that Bond would never know in another person. So they have a potential chemistry. They just don't bother to explain any of that or talk about any of it.
Yeah, and I feel like Bond just turns into as much of a, like, one-dimensional stereotype as everybody else by the end.
Yep. And that's kind of what the movie is that everything just boils down to one-dimensional stereotypes acting on each other with no reasons or motivations.
And maybe it would be... Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, if any of you, speaking of nonsensical things, this ties into a little bit with the ending that Steve was mentioning earlier. This is right before Bond drives off into the sunset with this girl. It's the movie at the end acts like Bond has been through some sort of character arc that he doesn't want to be a spy anymore, and he doesn't kill Blofeld for some reason.
I didn't understand that at all.
Yeah, I didn't understand what we were supposed to gauge from the previous scenes that would lead him to make that decision. I was just confused. I wanted to see if you guys got that, or I missed something.
I got nothing. This is not a movie about whether or not it's right to kill people.
There's one stray line where M says a license to kill is also a license not to kill people.
Not to kill,
and I could get into a whole ethical debate about why that makes no sense whatsoever.
I had the same thing. It's like, well, you don't need a license to not kill people. That's kind of just a natural thing that you probably shouldn't be doing. Why do you need a license to not? What the line should have been is the same thing as just because you can do a thing doesn't mean you should do a thing, right? That's what the line should have been.
Yeah, and the way M delivers it is really, really dumb. But Bond choosing to let Blofeld live is ultimately a worse option.
Yeah, it's about, but again, it's not about whether or not it's right to ever kill people. It's about when it's necessary and when it's not necessary. James Bond is a character with a license to kill. He's got a gun. The whole point is that, at least according to these movies, is that sometimes you need these people. This is a necessary evil. It's got to happen. And Bond is a guy with a trigger finger. When you first see him in Casino Royale, his answer for everything is just shoot things. And so the whole point is supposed to be that he learns that that sometimes there can be finesse, and that he should have some human empathy. You don't always have to kill people. But why not kill Blofeld?
Yeah, and part of the problem is I don't know what Spectre is. I know Blofeld's in charge of a thing he calls Spectre, and a thing called Spectre has arms and everything that we saw before. But how exactly does capturing or killing Blofeld stop or destroy the organization of Spectre so much so that Bond can ride off into the sunset with a girl? Like, is that entire organization just found dead because Blofeld's dead? Because that's what happens in the books. In the books, Spectre falls apart without Blofeld. But that's explained. That's a discussion. That's about him creating a cult of personality. That's not in here at all.
Well, the whole thing is relying on people seeing this movie being really excited about seeing the classic organization that they weren't allowed to use 2 movies ago. Like that's what it's all about. So, Steve, you're not supposed to think about what it is. You're supposed to be like, it's Spectre! Which, like, you can't treat it as a reveal because that's what the movie is called.
Yeah. And it's frustrating because on a rewatch, all the tension goes away. The first time, it catches you and it has a couple of moments where you're more taken off guard simply because you're waiting for things to happen. You're waiting for a moment where a character finally does something, you have a revelation, or there's a twist somewhere. So the tension's just naturally in you. On a rewatch, knowing what the movie's about, the entire thing lacks any kind of suspense whatsoever because everything is so easy. Bond is Superman. Bond can shoot down a helicopter with a pistol from a boat in the middle of the night.
And what sucks is it's made by the exact same people that finally got that right after a movie that did exactly that. I read Roger Ebert's review right after Quantum of Solace came out, and he was like, okay, so we're back to those movies where your action hero is like driving through a whole barrage of bullets and he never gets hit because of plot armor. Skyfall, in the first 4 minutes, he gets shot and falls off a train. Like, I was so excited about that. I was like, look, it's like, what do you call it? Like actions and then like consequences. It was really exciting. And then you get to this movie and we're right back to, I mean, the helicopter thing at the beginning is really cool, but we're back to that whole plot armor thing.
Yeah. And I guess age is a thing where after you get past a certain point, your body just naturally becomes fit and perfect again. Because that's here, right? So after I hit like 7, I will be amazing, right? That's how that works?
He had to work really hard to get his mojo back.
Yeah.
And part of that, like you said, was because he's older, right? Like it's not just that he got shot; it's that he's not real fit. And that whole movie was about the pros and cons to youth versus being older.
Yeah. That was the whole point of introducing Q as a younger person, what the advantages and disadvantages are, and what the experience means. None of that means anything here.
I could boil down why Skyfall is like a 15 times better movie than this just by saying that like it has ideas and I understand them. And I'm not even sure that this movie has ideas. There's places where they mention a couple things that sound like they're themes, but they're, as Dan said, they're the same thing from Skyfall. We're not like building on that, are we?
Nope, not at all. And it's sad because Mendes pitched this as a thematic sequel to Skyfall, and it's not.
Well, what's weird is it's thematically doing the same things but more generically, but then it's a direct plot sequel to Skyfall.
Yeah.
And that seems like the big misstep. Like, it seems to me like we shouldn't be making Bond movies that keep building from one to another so much as just use the same actor and tell another story that maybe vaguely connects but is a totally standalone thing. And then the next time you replace the actor, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You just make another movie.
Yeah. I mean, they didn't have to make Quantum an arm of Spectre. That's too easy. You could have very easily done a million other things. You could have done, and I hate on comparing it to this, you could have made it G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra. Where Blofeld is an agent of Quantum that takes over and makes it Spectre. This movie could take notes from G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra, and that's kind of sad.
Is there some reason that one's called one thing and the other's called some other thing?
Not any reason aside from rights issues. And I also hate that Bond assumes, like when he finds out an organization's behind all this, he says, what's their name? Why doesn't he assume it's just Quantum? Did we forget about them because we have Spectre now?
But then we bring him up again?
I really liked that movie.
Sorry, what's that, Dan?
I was saying, I think we kind of did forget about Quantum because nobody really liked that movie.
Oh, no, that's fair. And I'll go this far. As much not sense as this makes, I'd still rather watch it over that.
I don't know about that anymore.
Well, that's fine, but I didn't think Quantum was any fun. I didn't like the villain in that movie. Just everything about it. I didn't like it.
I think Quantum had more coherent ideas than this does.
Oh, I'm not saying that. I'm just talking about just on a pure entertainment enjoyability level. I'd rather watch this than Quantum. That's all I'm saying. Would I rather review this over Quantum? No. Like if I'm writing a literary analysis, yes, of course, give me Quantum of Solace. But if I'm just gonna pop something in my drink my RC Cola and sit back and watch a thing, I'm gonna watch this.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah.
Gotta separate our critical brains from our, what we like brains. So,
yeah.
Dan, are you with me on that? Would you rather watch this over Quantum?
I mean, I don't hate Quantum as much as a lot of people do. It's not a very good movie, but I enjoyed watching it when I saw it, and I've watched it a few times since, and I enjoy some of the action scenes in a similar way that I enjoy some of the other Bond movies. I mean, a lot of the old Bond movies before the Craig ones aren't very good. They just have cool action scenes too. So it's kind of like, par for the course in a lot of ways. But I don't know. I'd probably still watch this more than Quantum, because at least Christoph Waltz is in this, and I like the performance that he gives a little bit more than the guy that's the villain in Quantum of Solace.
Yeah, he's a little bit better than Green.
Yeah, I mean, he's a little bit more memorable, so... I
wouldn't say he's more memorable, but he's better than Green a little.
Yeah.
Because at least Green had a motivation.
Yeah, and I think Green's plot is kind of neat, too.
Yeah, the whole water idea I really like, and I hate that this movie just ignores that. That Quantum used to be a thing that's talking about like the energy wars and things ahead of stuff, and the fact that Quantum is such a massive and elusive thing that they're laughing in MI6's face because they're so much bigger than them. And then all of that's weirdly gone. It's like Dragon Ball Z, where you introduce a character with the ability to blow up a planet. When that happens, you don't have a scale of reference for anything anymore when someone gets stronger.
Mm-hmm.
So what is Spectre in relation to Quantum, and how do I quantify that anywhere?
So you had Quantum of Solace. It's really weird that we have two movies with an organization's name in it, but then one we have to like come up with like a clever way to not just make it the name of the organization, but then we get a Spectre and it's just called Spectre. We should have called this movie like Spectre of Discord.
Maybe. And Eric and I talked about this when we did our James Bond Road to Spectre video, that Quantum of Solace in the books actually meant something, and the movie has no idea what that is.
Oh, okay. Well, Spectre meant something too, and they don't really know what that means.
It's not an acronym anymore, it's just a word, and it's weird.
And spell. So you said it was spelled wrong. I don't know, is that maybe like the English spelling?
It might be, actually. I don't know. It's just weird that there's an organization called Spectre, and we don't know what the acronym stands for. It's just a word.
Yeah, that is weird. Also, is that are we trying to do some kind of surface symbolism with Day of the Dead at the beginning, where like they're wearing skull masks instead, and we got Bond wearing a skull mask because it's kind of ironic that he's going to go up against a thing called Spectre right after he wore a skull mask. I don't think there's anything deeper than that. I think
the idea might have been too that like by the end of the movie he decides not to kill people, so the Day of the Dead thing at the beginning is supposed to thematically connect with that, but I don't think it works.
It also ends with the word "the dead are alive," and that's what we hear about Franz Obenhauser, where he's dead, but he's actually alive.
Okay, but that's not. Well, that could be a really cool thing if there was more, especially if you had like more paralleling people that have that.
Yeah.
Right.
And
I guess his daughter has that to a degree because she's like, in hiding and, put away and doesn't really get to do anything.
Yeah, I mean, that just speaks to the movie being poorly structured because we know Franz Obenhauser is alive before we know there's a guy named Franz Obenhauser who's supposed to be dead.
Steve, I can't tell you how glad I am that you saw this twice.
It's a weird movie. I can't believe I paid for it twice. I feel bad. I should have just torrented it.
No, don't say that, Steve. well, guys, anything else you want to bring up before we close out?
I got one thing, unless Dan's got something else.
I'm all set. I think I said my piece on it.
Okay. Well, I just want to end off with one thing. The James Bond movies go in cycles. We start from a very Fleming place, and then over time we make them more and more absurd. And then they reach a pinnacle of absurdity where the franchise doesn't work anymore, and we say, well, let's just go back to Fleming. And we've done this with Connery when we got to Goldfinger and You Only Live Twice, and then we went back to the book with On Her Majesty's Secret Service. We did this again with Moore, where it got so insane by Living Daylights that we went to Dalton. The franchise broke with Die Another Day, so we decided to go back and do Casino Royale. The idea is always, we don't know what we're doing. We just keep adding things, and we're always left with a terrible financial situation that ends up going back to Fleming. So why do you leave Fleming in the first place?
Yeah.
Why not just keep making the books and the movies? And I get that some of them are awful, but that's what the point of an adaptation is. You can make it better. The problem is the Fleming estate, Eon Productions, Cubby Broccoli, Barbara Broccoli, they don't know what makes a good James Bond movie. They're like Avi Arad. Every time a new one comes out, they say this is definitive James Bond, but they don't know what makes it that. Eric brought this up, but James Bond should be like Sherlock Holmes. He should be public domain. Anyone should be able to do whatever they want, because at this point, the people who are in charge of the character are monopolizing it, and the quality is really suffering. We are getting stuck in a loop over and over again. It's not just a fluke. Spectre being bad is another indication that there's a pattern with this production company where it's just not working.
And what's really sad about that is that I really expected after Skyfall to see a golden age of Bond movies where we'd have 3 or 4 really good ones in a row.
Yeah.
And I bet a lot of people thought that. Now, I don't know if this had anything to do with the production and how weird and messed up the filming was, but I found myself immediately raising an eyebrow that this wasn't another summer movie like Skyfall was.
Yeah, I'm not sure what was up with that, but wasn't Casino and Quantum both in the fall?
They were, but you'd think after you had this big, after you put one out and pitched it as a giant summer blockbuster that made so much money, that you try to at least kind of, for lack of a better word, fool your audience into thinking that lightning struck twice. Like I'm not saying that you can't have these in the winter. I'm just wondering if the weirdness of the production didn't have something to do with the fact that they didn't do what they did with Skyfall.
Yeah, that's possible. It certainly feels like a summer movie with the way it opens and everything.
Yeah, well, and we're in a place now where you can kind of put blockbusters out at any time of the year, but what was it about Skyfall that made everybody go see it? I mean, I'm not saying that it was just that it was in the summer, but like it's really interesting because this movie, I don't think it's doing all that well.
It's doing
Or is
really well. It's doing really well.
Oh, is it? Okay.
In the UK. It's not as big as Skyfall. It had like a $15 million shorter opening, but it broke the record for biggest opening in the UK.
Okay. I didn't know that.
It's still doing really well. The critical reception went from like 90% to 62%, which is lower than Quantum in a matter of a day. So even if it's a financial success, I bet it's going to be a critical failure. But I don't know if the Cubbies, not the Cubbies, I don't know if the Broccoli's recognize this. I don't know if Eon understands what they did with this franchise. Because after this, the only option you have is scrap everything and start over again. I
have something to point out before we move on, too.
Yeah, sure.
Skyfall was released in November as well.
Oh, wait, was it really?
Yeah.
Why do I remember that as a summer movie?
I'm not sure.
Okay, well, I'm sorry I spent 3 minutes making a point that is complete nonsense, Dan. All right, well, I retract the dumb idiocy that I just presented, and let's move on. Thanks, Dan.
That's the same UK release date as Spectre, October 26th.
Weird. I remember that being maybe. You know, it's funny that now you say that. Back when that came out, I was making the point. See, this is why you can put out a blockbuster at any time of the year.
Oh wow, that's bizarre.
I remember talking about that now. It's been a couple years. What do you want from me? Anyway, all right. Anything else anybody wants to bring up before we close out?
I think we're good. Unless you want to mention some comments.
Oh, are there comments?
There's a few.
Oh, cool. People are commenting again. Yeah, for a while there, I wasn't seeing anything, so I didn't see anything. Somebody said something about a real Slim Joker. I like the Bond movies before the series became Nolanized. Isn't it fascinating that we had Batman and Bond just going back and forth?
Yeah.
Just being totally influenced by each other because Nolan intentionally borrowed some Bond stuff for the Batman movies, but did you know that part of the reason he did that, it's not just because he's a big Bond fan. He grew up with Batman comics, and what he said in interviews is that he went back, when he was a kid and he was reading Denny O'Neil stuff, he saw Bond influence in Batman comics. So he brought Bond to his Batman movies. And then Skyfall, Mendez was really influenced by Dark Knight when he made Skyfall. So we've got Bond and Batman just going back and forth, going all the way back to the 70s.
And it's interesting just how many parallels there are between Dark Knight Rises and Skyfall, despite coming out in the exact same year. They were both on the same train of thought for those movies. And then
it's fascinating that there's a lot of things that people are making, people comparing a lot of things between this movie and Rises too.
Yeah.
Both in how they feel about how they work positively and negatively, and also in plot stuff and how they end, especially.
Yeah.
You know, because this is kind of in some ways, isn't it the James Bond doesn't have to always be James Bond movie? Sort of like Rises was for Batman?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Which just kind of proves my point of these guys don't know what makes James Bond. They don't get this character. Like, tiny moments, like, it's been a few months since Skyfall, and Bond's apartment looks like he hasn't moved in yet. That's not what Bond would do. That's not what Craig's Bond would do. That's just little details. They don't understand this character.
I don't feel like that's what his Bond would do now. He seems consummate James Bond now. Like, he's grown into something much closer to the suave, really super confident, maybe even overconfident spy. Why doesn't his apartment reflect the way he's acting in that opening sequence?
Well, I mean, at the end of Skyfall, he kind of became that. Like, he became the consummate Bond. So at that point, the apartment should look exactly like what it does in the books, or not only that, but just reflect his personality of being a lot cleaner and being nicer and being, in a lot of ways, a little bit British and snooty. Because that's
but that's the point I'm making, though, is that in the opening sequence in Mexico, I'm seeing, like, the plastic Bond. And
he's wearing a suit under a suit.
Yeah! Yeah, and I just, he should be, I mean, like, when somebody comes to his apartment, he should have art all over the walls, and he should be making martinis for people. Like,
yeah, I mean, they just don't get this character, and there's lots of these moments, and Eric mentioned a few when we were talking, but they're just details and missteps. Like, half of the dialogue of Age of Ultron for Tony Stark is Robert Downey Jr. improvising. Whedon doesn't write half of the quips, because Robert Downey Jr. gets that character so much. You don't see that with the Craig Bond movies. It doesn't seem like anyone really knows what the vision is. They just keep regressing and going in circles.
Yeah. McCaffrey says Bond movies are supposed to be spy movies with action in them, but since 2006 they've been action movies with a spy theme. They're just like the Bourne movies. They're action movies with a spy theme. Well, but I feel like the Brosnan movies had that to a degree too, yeah?
The Brosnan movies are weird, because the Brosnan movies are, let's distill the formula of Bond and just recreate that 4 times.
But that sounds to me like action first.
Well, it's not
kind of what he's saying.
It's not necessarily action first. It's exactly the way the plot beats work and which characters he interacts with and the type of villains he always faces.
Okay.
So it's a little bit more than the action. It's like there's always 2 Bond girls. One of them always betrays him. The villain's always either a rival spy organization or a business person. There's a very particular plot structure that's mimicked 4 times over.
I would argue that the Bond movies became action first a very long time ago.
That's true. I mean, ever since
like the middle of Connery's career as James Bond, they've been action first.
Yeah,
I mean,
around that area.
Steve, I'm not saying that you're not right about the formula thing. I'm just saying that like they do seem to be more about the action than they are about anything else.
Yeah, I guess Craig has the opposite then, because the action comes second, or at least it's supposed to with Casino and Skyfall.
It serves the story more, certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think those 2 things are mutually exclusive. You can have a good spy movie with big action set pieces in it. It just depends on how you execute it.
Yeah, I mean, Man from U.N.C.L.E., the Henry Cavill reboot did that perfectly.
Oh, is that movie any good?
It's amazing.
Really? I should have gone to that. I forgot all about it.
Henry Cavill is the most likable man I've ever seen. The way he smiles is great. Oh, he's perfect.
See, again, I'm not a big spy guy, but I was intrigued to see him in another role.
If you wanted a 60s period kind of Bond movie with Henry Cavill, that's kind of what you get there. It's so much fun.
Speaking of, maybe this would be a good place to end off. We were talking earlier. We're kind of just taking a conversation we had in text and translating it to a live show. But earlier today we were talking over Facebook chat, and we should just talk about this for a second. What do you guys think about the notion of just doing period Bond movies? Like, what if you just took it back to the 60s?
That'd be cool.
I would love that. I don't think we'd get away with it properly. Because if you go back to the 60s, you have to do blunt, snooty, racist, sexist Bond unless you're painting a fantasy picture of it all. So you either recreate Roger Moore or you make the Fleming books. And I feel like they're not... I feel like they just wouldn't be able to get away with either of those at this point.
Well, I mean, there were people in the 60s that weren't racist, sexist, too.
Yeah, like, why must Bond be that way just because he was...
Because that's what the character is. Like, the character is that. The whole point of him in the books is that he's a horrible person.
Right, but you're just saying that because it's the same period. He's not that way right now. Why couldn't we just take what he is now and put him in the 60s? Would it really, like... Or is that really that much of a clash?
I mean, I think so. I mean, he's got to be blunt. He's got to be brutal. If you can make like campy Roger Moore movies again, but you'd need an actor like Roger Moore to do something like that.
Like that's like saying the problem with Chris Pine's Kirk is that he's not sexist enough. Like,
I don't know. I see, because that's the thing that gets lost. There's a new Bond book out called Trigger Mortis that I just started reading, and it's a continuation of that Ian Fleming era, but it's extremely modern sensibility. So it's got it's got all the political and current atmosphere of what we have now, and idealizes what the 50s were like. It just doesn't work that way.
But you don't have to do that. You can still not idealize it and still have a Bond that all you have to do, I think, is just avoid dealing with those kinds of things that much, right? Like,
but is it really Bond though at that point? Because I mean, you're just gonna make a generic spy 60s thing. Just keep making Man from U.N.C.L.E.
I don't know, but then your argument sounds like you'd have to be implying that he's not Bond now because he's not like that.
Well, he is like that. He is brutal, and he's not a good person.
Yeah, but he doesn't have to be sexist and racist on top of it.
Well, he's not sexist and racist now because he's growing up, or he's existing in a different time period. He's still a bad person by our modern sensibility.
Okay.
So if you're just gonna make good guy Errol Flynn spy for the 60s, it doesn't have to be Bond.
I still think he could be
that squeaky clean Errol Flynn kind of guy to not be racist and sexist.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. I don't mean to gang up on you, Steve, but I don't agree with this.
I just feel like at that point, if you're going to take him back to that era, then it's a really big missed opportunity to just not make him full-on Bond.
Okay.
Oh, so you're just saying that if they did that, you want him to be racist. That's what you're saying.
I mean, it's not like I'm not saying I like racist characters or anything. I'm just saying there's a specific characterization there. Even Roger Moore, when he was being campy and jokey, he was still kind of sexist. That's still part of the character. And if you're going to take that away from him and give him that period, then what's the point of giving him that period?
To make it look like the 60s and be fun? I don't know. Like, there's a lot of other things you can do in the 60s other than...
You can do that now, too, right? Like, I don't know. Like, X-Men First Class deals with some of those issues, and it works in the 60s, but it also deals with the mental mindset of that era. So if you're just going to go back and make it a fantasy, just do it now and make it a fantasy. It doesn't have to... The
argument I would make is that the real reason to put it back in the 60s or any time period before the internet is to get away from modern technology so that every movie doesn't have to be about how this stuff is outdated now. Because I don't know how you move forward and make make James Bond a relevant thing that isn't just constantly making the point of is it outdated or is it not? Like, we've done that twice now, and arguably maybe all four of them did that to a degree. I don't know. I don't remember a lot about Casino and Quantum. It's been a while, but like the last two have been all about that. I mean, like you either go back and you make a nostalgic movie, or you make a movie that is like jaded about the fact that it doesn't get to be that. So I'm just saying. I think that's the reason you go back, and it's easier to tell those kinds of stories and to have really cool spy stories without having to worry about the fact that we've got satellites that can track everything and GPS and all that stuff. I think it's easier to tell those stories in that time period.
Yeah, but I mean, like the way it sounds to me is you can tell better spy stories in the 60s, but a better spy story is not the same thing as a good James Bond story. Because James Bond stories are a very particular type of spy story.
Okay.
Yeah, but they were also originally written then and set in that period, right? So it becomes almost. I mean, it's not exactly the same thing, but it's. I don't know. It's sort of like it's. What do I want to try? It's sort of like Indiana Jones. Doesn't feel like Indiana Jones when you take it out of the 30s.
Yeah, but I mean, again, there's a type of characterization around Indiana Jones. There's a type of characterization around Bond that works with that context.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just saying. I think in general it would work better in that period. I'm also not saying you can't tell modern spy stories. I think a modern spy story is very different from what people would want out of a James Bond story, generally speaking. I mean, like when I first saw Casino Royale, I was like, this is cool, but it doesn't feel like a Bond movie to me.
It was
originally part of that's because I didn't read the book.
It was originally supposed to be a black and white 50s movie directed by Tarantino.
Really? I kind of wish we'd gotten that.
Yeah, that was his original intention. No one ever heard from him. No one contacted him about making it, and he wanted Brosnan for it.
That's fascinating.
I'm still kind of sad we didn't get that. That would have been fun.
That would have been awesome.
Okay, well, I almost ended this 15 minutes ago, and then Steve and I got into a heated argument about the 60s. Anyway, okay, well, everybody, thanks as always for watching. Sure appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you're watching live, thanks for being with us. And if you're watching after the fact, thanks for watching after the fact. And I don't know what our next spoiler podcast will be, but we will definitely do one of these after, as we always do, major superhero stuff. And anything we all happen to see that we're really excited to delve into and sink our teeth into, talk about thoroughly, we will do in a live show format like this. And in the meantime, join us again next week for Primetime Crisis Live at 8 p.m. Central. In the meantime, I'm Captain Logan, and this was Dan Torrey.
Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed it.
And Steve Baxi.
See you, everybody.